delay your closing. So, any questions on any of that? I'm sure you guys are all doing wonderfully on that stuff.
How much can that delay a closing?
Well, it depends, because I've actually, worst case scenario, we've actually had one where we found addendums, all of a sudden they gave us addendum 7 the day before, and we had addendum 5 prior to that. We're missing addendum 6. What has to happen, and say that shows up at the closing table, the appraiser has to look at that addendum, has to. And the problem is the addendum may address something that's going to cause a problem to your loan. So it has to be reviewed. So if it's a perfect addendum, you're looking at an hour best case scenario, because it has to go back and be reviewed by them. Worst case, it comes and introduces something that the lender's going to say, I can't handle that. We got to go back and have somebody go out and fix it, and it needs to be addressed, or it needs to be inspected. So if that shows up the last day, you could end up with a delayed close. Anything else? Thank you for letting us be a part of everything you do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Good
Yeah,
luck.
great. Okay, good morning. How are you?
Good.
Good. All right. Good. We got some goods and an excellent. Outstanding. So, listing presentation. Is that why we're here, Amy? Okay. All right. So let me start by, first of all, telling a story, and then I'm going to ask you a question. I got into the business 24 years ago, and I remember the first company that I was with, Eager and Company. Anybody remember that? Anybody been in the business long enough to remember Eager? Okay. Eager and Company, yes, you remember. They were in the business for 33 years at the point they hired me, and when the sales manager sat down with me, my first, what I guess consider my coaching conversation with him, he said, "Congratulations, John." And I said, "For what?" He said, "Well, you're the first rookie that we have hired in our 33 years of business." And I was feeling pretty good about myself. You know, we've got this it's a preeminent high-end brokerage boutique. They've got about 35, 40 agents representing the high-end market. If you are familiar with the Cottonwood area, Pheasant Lane, in that area, well, they were right on Highland and Spring Lane, right on the corner there. There's a Watts development. They were in a very beautiful building there, high-end office, just gorgeous. And he said, "You are the first rookie." And so I'm feeling really good about myself. Well, a year later, they were out of business. So I guess my claim to fame is that I put them out of business. And But I remember those first experiences with them, and I remember the conversation. And that sales manager, Jerry O'Neill, said, "One of the things that we're going to do, John, is we're going to make certain the market is aware of who you are so that you get business." I said, "Great." It made sense to me, because I thought if people don't know who I am, it's going to be difficult for me to make money in the business. So he said, "You need to make sure you have a car." I said, "Well, I have that." He said, "What is it?" I said, "It's a 1990 Volkswagen Fox." Now, remember, this was 1993, so relatively new. He said, "Wrong car." I said, "Okay, good." He said, what kind of car would you like to drive?" I said, "Well, I'd like to drive a Lincoln Town Car." He said, "Great, go down and get one." So I went down and got one, Brandon. It was a cherry red Lincoln Town Car that had seats as white as your shirt.
Wow.
It was gorgeous. It looked like a rolling brothel, which was great for the business. No, that fedora, I purchased that later. So I bought the car, which was great. And then he said, "Now, do you have a suit?" I said, "No, I don't. I'm from Orangeville, Utah. I have Levi's and some cowboy boots." He said, "That's not going to work, so we need to get you a suit." So I went and got a suit. He said, "Now, do you have a dog?" I said, "Yeah, I have a dog." I'm thinking to myself, what does that have to do with real estate? And he said, "Well, the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to take you and put you out into the field and have you in various action poses in the business of real estate." Exactly. So there I was. Those of you who are old enough to remember, he had me in the car. I was sitting on the seat, but halfway out with my one foot out on the ground. And I was leaning on this foot or this leg here with the cell phone to my ear. And if you don't, those of you who don't remember, let me find my cell phone. So I had my cell phone to my ear, right? And if you remember, it wasn't just a brick. Back in the day, there was actually a cord. Remember the old phones that had a cord? It literally had a cord, and then there was a big box that you would mount in the center of the car. Remember those? Right? So he had me with a picture of that going on. And then he said, "The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a picture of you with your dog, because those who have dogs will be able to relate to you, and it's important that we start to build a connection." And I'm thinking, okay, this is making sense. Yeah, okay, we're starting to actually cook with gas here. I'm now a professional. I'm in business. He said, "Now, the other thing that we want to do is you're going to be in this suit. We're going to put you on top of a home. We're going to be on the roof. We're going to take your picture." I know. Yeah. And I said, "Well, why are we doing that?" He said, "Well, because the caption's going to be at the bottom, Sean. It's going to read, 'John Ciet is on top of his market,'" right? Now, this is exciting. Woo! So I said, okay, what are we going to do with this stuff? He said, well, we're going to put them on bus benches. We're going to put ads in the newspaper, in Homes Illustrated, Homes and Land, the local home magazines. He said, well, we're also going to put them on shopping carts, which we did. It cost me thousands of dollars that I didn't have, that I had to borrow from family in order to make that happen. The good news is I'm still in business, but it wasn't because of that. In fact, because I followed that program for my first year, that first year I made $15,000. It doesn't have to be that way in this business. How many of you have been in the business for less than 12 months? Raise your hands. Okay, oh good. So we are talking to the right crowd here. Let me ask you a question, and anybody can answer this question. Veterans, don't be afraid to answer it as well, because in the interest of time, because I have to be out of here at 11:15. Let me ask you, what is your value? What value do you offer to the public? See, because back in the day, in 1993, I thought my value was that I had a real estate license and I had access to the MLS. Because I had access to the MLS, that the sellers would come to me, knocking on the door of the office, or calling me and saying, John, I understand you have a real estate license. We would like you to list our home and to sell it. Well, what I discovered is, how many of you are having sellers knock on your door or walk in or call you up and say, I want you to list my home? With the exception of maybe your parents or your grandparents, right? Say it. Zero. In other words, it's not what? It's not happening. Say it. It's not happening. It doesn't happen that way. This is a direct sell business. In other words, we have to what? Proactively go out and prospect, talk to the people, right? So there I am back then thinking that this was all going to work out. Well, it didn't. I'm here to ask you this question. What is the value that you offer to the marketplace? Why should people work with you? Do you have an answer to that question that is compelling? What is your value? Do you know? Don't answer it. Thank you. Because we just had this conversation yesterday, in a coaching conversation. What is your value? See, I believe that when you're asked that question, you should know it instantly without any hesitation. And if you don't, can you say Mayday? Say Mayday.
Mayday.
What does Mayday mean? Help, right? If you don't know the answer to that question, that's a problem. You should be able to very quickly answer that question so that you can translate that practically in this business when it's time to engage in business with people. Because if you don't know your value, how are they going to understand what your value is? How many of you have ever been in a competitive situation with a listing or maybe with buyers where you ended up not getting that business? If you're in the room, say aye. Aye. You've had that happen, right? Do you know what happened there? It wasn't that the other brokerage maybe offered a discount. It wasn't because they knew that agent, they were a family friend. This is the answer. You did not offer enough what? That's the answer. You could say that it's all those other things, but it isn't. Those things are just excuses. How many of you, Amy, have you ever represented an individual that had a family member in the business?
Yes.
How is that possible? They had a family member in the business, and yet they chose to work with you. Just happened to her yesterday.
I stole that.
Okay, perfect. However, you have to get in the business, right? But you have to offer value, and if you don't offer value, they're not going to choose you. Now, what is the typical way that the average agent offers value? There are two primary ways. I want you to think about this. What does the typical real estate agent do to offer value in the marketplace?
Help educate the public.
Okay. Help educate the public. Good. I like that answer. It's not the answers, but it's a good answer. They should do that.
Are you looking for commission?
Okay, that is one answer. So agents will do what in the marketplace in order to represent value? They'll cut their commissions, right? They'll reduce the commission. Choose me because I know that the other agents have offered to do it for 6% or 7%, but I will do it for 5. I'll do it for 4.5. I'll do it for 4. I'll do it for a flat fee plus the 3% for the buyer side. And if I represent the buyers, then I'll even do it for less. Remember that car that I had that was cherry red and a white interior? Remember it looked like a brothel? Let's not get confused here. This is not prostitution. A lot of agents in the business are engaged in negotiating their price down just depending upon what other agents are offering. In my opinion, I don't care what the other agent is offering in terms of commission. As far as I'm concerned, it is irrelevant. Do not get caught up in the idea that another agent, because they're discounting their commission, that you have to in order to compete. Is it important to compete? Say yes.
Yes.
If you're in business and you want to have clients, you have to compete. But make certain you compete in the right areas. Don't compete on price. Do you think that Rolls-Royce competes on price? Do you think that Mercedes competes on price? Or BMW or Jaguar? The answer is what? No. Where do they compete? Quality, value. See, that's where we have to find ourselves competing, is in the realm of quality and value. So again, I go back to you and ask you this question. What is your value?
I can advertise your home better than the other agents can because I'm affiliated with Central 21.
Okay, that is a great answer. It is. And yet, what if you come across Amy? What if you and Amy are going head to head on a listing presentation, right? You both want that business. Doesn't she have access to the same tools and marketing?
And
Right.
It comes down to rapport with the homeowner.
Okay, so rapport. So what is the value that you offer? Let me give you the answer. Because this is what people are looking for. They may not say this to you, but I guarantee you this is what they're looking for. Say it.
Leadership.
It's your leadership. That is what they're looking for. The reason that a client will choose Amy versus a discount brokerage where they know that they could go to the discount brokerage and pay a flat fee plus 3% or less if that agent represents the buyer versus paying Amy a 7% or a 6% commission, which they do all the time. The reason is that ultimately they are looking for great leadership, and in her, and there are others of you like this in the room, Brandon Plant, another great example, right? The reason they choose those people is because those people are great what?
Leaders.
They're great leaders. So what is the hallmark of a great leader? The primary thing, what makes a great leader a great leader? Above all other things, what is it?
Confidence.
Okay, I like confidence, I like knowledge, but confidence, knowledge comes from one thing.
Persuasion.
Okay, persuasion, and more specifically, what do we call that?
Communication.
Yes. It's called communication. How many of you love to prospect? Okay, so we got 3 or 4 people who are absolutely certifiably insane. We've got some straitjackets for you after the session here, okay? The truth is that most of us don't like to prospect, but isn't it prospect really just this? Say it. It is communication, isn't it? Isn't it? Isn't prospecting communication?
Yes.
So we resist the very thing that we know that we're supposed to be doing as leaders, right? And as a result of resisting it, we tend to not be very what? Say it.
Good at it.
Good at it. We tend not to be very good at it. See, we can choose to compete on the level of price, discounting, commission. What's the second thing that most agents do to compete? The average agent. They discount the commission, and then what will they do to the value of the home? Inflate it.
Overpriced.
Right. So I'm going to overprice your home. I'm going to tell you what you want here relative to the value of your home, and I'm going to discount the commission, which creates a winning scenario for the agent to get the listing, but creates a disastrous formula for what? Getting the home actually sold. You wonder why so many homes expire in the marketplace. Don't be confused. It's not that the market isn't great. It's that there's not a leader in the transaction to actually have the conversation, the communication that has to occur to actually help that seller or the buyer get what it is that they want. Does this make sense? Say yes.
Yes.
Okay. So we know then, therefore, that our value truly is what? The number one value that we offer people is our ability to lead them through the conversation and to have them change their perspective and change their behavior to follow a proven plan, a process that we know that if they'll follow, they'll actually get what it is that they want. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. So based upon that, let's talk about what that looks like. Rolls-Royce will build a car, and the average car costs about $500,000. Toyota will build cars, and the average car will cost about $40,000. They're both basically the same thing, right? They're what? They're cars. They have wheels, they have seats, they have a paint job, steering wheel, they have lights, they have amenities, but are they really the same thing? They're not. They're not the same thing, and why is that? Because Rolls-Royce uses a, say it, that is different than Toyota. It takes 6 months to build a typical Rolls-Royce, just a basic Rolls-Royce. It takes 13 hours to build a typical Corolla. A completely different what?
Process.
Different process. In other words, they have different what? Standards. Okay? Do you want to do more business? Say yes. That's why you're here, right? No confusion? Cool, good. If you want to do more business, then we have to take a look at what our standards are. We have to identify what our formula is that we're applying and make certain that it's the right formula. If I said to you 10 times 10, you would say 100. Okay, so the analytical's got it. The rest of you are still calculating, right? It's like, that was like 4th or 5th grade. Why do we need to know that? Okay, if I said 5 times 5, you would say, right? If I said 5,662 times 2,122, now what would you say? Calculator, right? Yeah, right? But the reason that you do 5 times 5 and 10 times 10 is because really you understood the what? The formula. Great communication comes down to a formula. There are key things that if we understand those components, it doesn't matter the conversation. If we understand those components of that formula, we can apply that formula in any situation and get great what? Results or great answers. See, 5,562 times 2,133, we will get the answer without a calculator if we understand the what? The formula. We just simply have to figure it out longhand, right? Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to give you today is a basic formula on what a great listing presentation should include so that when you go out there, you can compete not on the level of value of the commission or the price of the commission or the price of the home, but rather on a level of offering greater value so that people are willing to pay your what? See, Rolls-Royce doesn't say, well, we understand that Toyota is selling cars on average for $40,000, so we're going to discount our cars so that we can compete with Toyota. Make no mistake about it, Rolls-Royce does not compete with Toyota. They have no, or anybody else. They compete with themselves. Does that make sense? Okay, so the listing presentation has 2 parts. If you're taking notes, write this down. It has 2 parts. This stuff is not complicated. We have a tendency to complicate this stuff. It's not complicated. It has 2 parts. The first part, I call it the what, Brandon? Remember?
Oh, was it the roadmap? Or the
Well, no, the first part, the choose me.
Okay.
It's the choose me. That's the first part. When you sit down with somebody, we're trying to get them to choose us versus the what? Versus the competition. In other words, we have to have the ability to differentiate ourselves from the competition. The competition will discount their commission. They'll tell them the price that they want to hear. They'll make all sorts of promises. We've got to figure out, well, how do we compete with that? We're going to talk about how we compete with that over here. Make sense? Okay, let me ask you this question. When did your listing presentation begin? Okay, so placeholder here. Would you say?
The first phone call I make to you.
First phone call. Okay, anybody else? Do you agree first phone call before you get there? Okay, see heads shaking. Why is that? Sean?
Actually, when you practice and you role play.
Okay. Okay, I like that. I mean, yes, we need to be prepared for it, right? And that's really what you're saying. Brandon, you were going to say?
I think it's prequel.
Okay. Listen to what he just said. You said prequel. Why is that?
Well, they give you the bullets to load the gun.
Okay.
Okay, so it puts you in a position where you can succeed when you're there, and to know if you're even going to go.
Okay.
So it just prepares you for what's going to happen, and that's why I think it's.
So let me maybe pick on Lou, Amy, and Brandon. When you go out on a listing presentation, what percentage of the time do you get the listing? Okay, so 9 out of 10 times you're getting it. Okay, so 9 out of 10 times? 9 out of 10 times. Would you say that they're highly skilled? Okay. And I agree, they are highly skilled. But do you know one thing that they're doing that most agents aren't doing, that it may be that you're not doing? Would you all like to increase your conversion rate from sitting down with the seller and presenting to the point that they sign the contract? Say yes.
Yes.
The little secret is this, and it's probably the most powerful thing, is that these people understand that the presentation doesn't begin when they sit down at the kitchen table. It begins at pre-qualification. That's what Brandon said. He said, they give me the bullets to load the gun. I always say this, I use this metaphor. Lou, I like to say this. Do you remember when you were in high school or in college when your teacher or professor gave you the choice of taking an open book test versus a closed book test? Did you ever get that option?
Yeah.
I did at times. Which one did you choose? The open book or the closed book? Open book. Why?
Because you thought it'd be easy.
It would- Right, because all the answers are where?
Right in the book.
Yeah. Would you guys like to take the open book test when it comes to getting a listing?
Yes.
Okay. The way to do that is to pre-qualify. It's to ask the questions that you need to discover the information that you need to prepare for the appointment so that you go out and you're not blindsided. So you know when you show up, they're actually motivated and they intend to list the home. See, these two ladies go out on appointments because they know that the seller's ready to sign a contract. Otherwise, they're not showing up. How many of you will go out to an appointment just because you say you want the practice, or you say that, well, I don't know enough, so I've got to go out and have the conversation, and then you walk away not having a contract signed? The reason that happens is because the pre-qualifying is not happening before, it's happening when? During. That doesn't make any sense. That's like saying, well, I got to find my gun and I got to find the bullets during the battle. What's going to happen? You're going to get shot. You're going to get shot. How many of you are getting shot in your listing presentation? Not literally, figuratively, right? Okay, so we want to take the open book test, right? So the open book test is we ask the questions in the pre-qualify so that we go out and we know what we need to talk about. Which pre-qualifying questions do you ask? It's really simple. You have a script book, and it's outlined in your script book. Who does not have a script book that's been issued by the company? You all have it. Okay, good. So just simply refer back to that. There isn't one of you who shouldn't be including that in your listing what? Formula. You want to get better results, better answers, make certain that your formula is the right formula. It starts with, number one, having the pre-qualification and the right script. Okay? All right. So in the choose me phase, it starts with the pre-qual. Any questions on that? Now's the time to ask. There's no dumb question. Yes, absolutely.
I think one of the things that I messed up all the time when I was younger in business is thinking that my charisma would bring them to the night if I just came. I didn't want to ask certain questions because I didn't want to offend them or get the wrong answer.
Yep.
And then I'd wait till I get there and then I could,
Finesse.
make sure they like me, mess
Right.
with it. And yeah, you make a lot of friends that way, but you don't get very much business because you put so much time. So much time.
Right. The number of times that somebody has told me, Amy, that they've gotten into business because they like people, which is great. You should. If you don't like people, you're probably in the wrong business. But at the end of the day, don't great leaders have to have the ability to ask questions and say things that most aren't willing to say? Think about Martin Luther King. Did he say things back in the day in the 50s and 60s that were popular? No. Absolutely contrary to that. In fact, the things that he said got him death threats. In fact, he said in 1958 in an interview to a reporter, when the reporter asked, aren't you afraid that your life is in danger? And he said, yes, in fact, I fully expect that my life will be taken because of the things that I say. And guess what happened? Right? Some of you are saying, well, that's why I don't tell anybody the truth or confront them because I don't want to be shot in the presentation, right? We understand that that's not going to happen, but we feel at the same time we don't want to be rejected, so therefore we want to make friends and say the things that we think that they want to hear, right, in order to get the business. Do you think that people are looking for a friend when you engage in this transaction, this conversation with them?
No.
They're not. They're looking for a what?
Leader.
A leader, a professional, who's willing to say things that others aren't willing to say. Yes, Brandon? Yes, to tell the truth.
The other part, in piggybacking off what Amy said, is we don't ask the questions because we don't want the answers because it was so hard to get to that point where we have the appointment that we don't want them to say anything that's going to blow that up.
That's right. That's right.
And so we don't ask those questions because we don't want the answer because there still might be a chance.
At least we have an appointment, right?
Yeah, right.
At least we have a chance. Yep. It's great.
But in reality, we should want all that information because, in some cases, it's in hopes of, getting the information that will maybe even cancel the appointment, but
That's
then
right.
you're not wasting your time.
Right. Right. Because at the end of the day, we want to talk to people who are qualified and motivated to follow our process so that we can help them. Stop trying to convince people who aren't interested in truly buying or selling real estate to do that. Find the people who are, who simply need to be convinced that you're the right person to do that thing. Yes, Lou?
And I think you have to be willing, because at the end of the day, there's so much that you can do and say to let someone, but they have to be willing to trust in you. They have to be willing to listen to you. Because a lot of the time when I go to a listing and we talk about all the things that we do and we get the listing and the seller is not willing, to put in the effort, they just tested the market. And so that's the pre-qualification that we have to do, and we have to know when to drop it. Because we tend to drag on the relationship.
Right.
I feel there's a lot of clients out there that you in your head. You just have to.
I agree. How many of you as a real estate agent have been fired before? Come on. In other words, they said, we want to cancel the agreement. We want to work with somebody else. It's happened to me before, right? You know, one of the coolest things to be able to do in this business is to fire a client, right? Think about that. Having the standards, say, look, I'm going to only work with people who are willing to listen to what I have to say and follow my process. And if they're not willing to follow my process, then fire them. Yes, Amy.
And sometimes you don't ask them questions and it's not on the script. I had one that they turned down like 18 showings. And I'm like, we gotta get together.
Yeah.
What is going on? I'm sorry if you're having dinner, we gotta get people to the house. And the wife really didn't want to move. She didn't want to move, it was all the husband. And I should have dug just a tiny bit deeper on that side. I do now. Now I'm like, are you guys moving together? Is this a divorce situation? I mean, I want to know every detail, and people respect it.
They do.
They expect.
Ask
They do. They
that.
respect it and they expect it. Yes.
A big mistake I made this year with listing is that I was so excited to get the listing that I forgot the most important thing is understanding your client's needs. Because at the end of the day, if you don't understand their needs, then there's no way you're able to help them. And with him, the sale, he would not make that much money from it, from the sale of his house, but we're trying to figure out a way, like, because he said he was excited about selling his house, but when it came down to us getting an offer, he's like, oh, I can't sell my house anymore because I need to make a certain amount. And I'm like, well, you told me you're okay with walking around with this X amount of money. He's like, well, I have a big car payment that I need to be able to make big payments to. I'm like, oh my gosh, I should
Right.
ask him about that.
Right. And we're going to talk more about that because you're spot on, Long. Thank you.
My best year, I turned down as many listings as I took. And it was because I had an internal belief of what I was, my formula, my program, and if they didn't conform to that, then I had a checklist. And literally one of the things on the checklist was, were they able to be worked with? Are they cool?
Right.
Like,
Are they coachable?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're going to deal with a client like that, it can tube your whole business. If you're dealing with somebody who's just fighting you at every turn.
Absolutely.
But it was awesome. It was so invigorating to be able just to say, I'm not going to work with you because you.
It's
don't-
very empowering.
Yeah.
Because it sends a message that you're in control. It sends a message to them as well as to you, which is very important. You know the name Warren Buffett, right? Warren Buffett has a policy. He said, I have a box. It's my formula. This is my box. It has 4 corners in it. I understand the shape of it. And anything that I look at, anybody that comes to me with an idea, a potential business deal, an opportunity, if it doesn't fit within the 4 corners of my box without expanding it or contorting it, it does not go in. I want you to think about that. Understand what your standards are and what your formula is. And if people don't fit within that, walk away. Because what you end up doing is spending a lot more time, energy, and effort trying to get people to conform and comply with your formula when they never will. You miss out on the opportunities to work with the people who what? Who will. Yes.
Yeah, it's just like the example you get like Rolls-Royce versus Toyota. Not everyone can afford Rolls-Royce, right? But when they get Rolls-Royce, they know what to expect.
Absolutely.
It's just like when they get your service, when they work with you, they know what they expect. The expectation, they know this is, if I'm paying this much, this is what I'm going to get out of it.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day.
Absolutely.
I totally agree with
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. So, the first step in the choose me phase and the first step in the listing presentation is pre-qualification. The second step, and we do this face-to-face when we meet with them at the home or wherever it is you meet them, is TAP, T-A-P. What does that stand for, those of you who are familiar with it?
Thanks.
Okay, so we thank them. And then what's the second part?
Acknowledge.
We acknowledge. And then the third part? We promise. Now, what are we going to thank them for? What are we going to acknowledge, and what are we going to promise them? This is the critical part.
Thank them for the opportunity.
Okay? We can thank them for the opportunity. Okay, what are we going to acknowledge?
Time they're taking.
These are, I'm giving you a trick question here, okay? Because I want you to think about this. So thank them for what?
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for them for the opportunity.
Acknowledge the time that they're taking.
Okay, acknowledge the time. So opportunity, time, and what are you going to promise them?
Best.
You'll do the best for them.
That you'll do the best. Okay, all right. Will other people thank them for the time, the opportunity, and that they'll do the best? Won't your competition do that? In fact, I guarantee you that's what your competition will typically say. That's what they're going to say, particularly if they're minimally trained. Yes.
Just want to not just say that, but if you'll follow my leadership, I know that together we'll get the most that this market will allow.
Okay, I think that's a very powerful statement, yes. And I think that's on par with what everybody else has said here in terms of what you could say. But this is a trick question. What should you say here? I don't know at this point. How could I not know at this point what I should say here? See, if I haven't pre-qualified them, if I haven't asked questions about their what?
Motivation.
Okay, their motivation, their expectations, the challenges that they had in the past. In other words, if I didn't get an opportunity to let them tell their story, and I didn't listen to it, I really don't know what to say here of value. What all of you said is not wrong, it's just not the best answers. See, the best answer here is, remember, what sort of test do I like to take? Open book. And I discover the answers when? In the pre-qual. So if I ask enough questions, I can discover things about their wants, wishes, needs, hopes, desires, and their fears, and then based upon that, then start to think and acknowledge and promise based upon what I discovered in the pre-qualification. Does that make sense? Does it seem like that might be important? Why? Why would that be important?
You know the right thing to say.
Okay, know the right thing to say, but
They
why
know
is
you're
this
listening.
technique important? Okay, so they know that you're listening. Why is that important?
Instills confidence in them.
Okay, so it instills confidence, right?
The number one complaint people have with agents is that they don't.
Speak up, sir, we can hear you.
The number one complaint people have with agents is they don't listen to me.
Okay, so the public believes that you don't listen to them. Do you believe that? Well, it doesn't matter whether you believe it, they do. Right? They don't believe that you listen. Why is that? Because agents aren't doing this. They're not pre-qualifying, asking questions, and giving people an opportunity to... Do you all have the answers? Are you the professionals? Do you know what it takes to sell a home? So really, you do have all of the answers. How many of you have a multi-point plan of action? 10, 12, 18, 21. How many of you have a plan of action? Raise your hands and keep them up if you do. Okay, those of you who don't, you should. Where do you get a plan of action? Go back to your script book. It's in there. Every one of you should have a plan of action. Do not go on a listing presentation without a plan of action. But let me ask you, those who have the plan of action, do you go through the plan of action point by point by point in the presentation? You're shaking your head resolutely. No, I don't do that. Why not?
Well, because I don't know what's important to them, so why would I go
Pause.
to a song and a
Say that again. Listen to what he just said. This is important. Say it.
I don't know what's important to them yet.
He doesn't know what's important to them. So you go in and you meet somebody and you thank, acknowledge, and promise for basic things. Thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about getting your home on the market and getting it sold. And I promise you that if you follow my leadership, I'm going to get your home sold. Those are great things to say, but you're not really, you know what that is? That is a monologue. Great relationships are built upon having dialogue. We can't have dialogue unless we're asking questions, discovering what's important. Wants, needs, wishes, desires, hopes, as well as the fears. And then when we meet them at the house and we thank, acknowledge, and promise, we can mention some of those key things that we discovered in the pre-qualification. If I say to Brandon, so Brandon, let's say that you're an expired, okay? So let's create the scenario. You had your home on the market for how long?
6 months.
For 6 months. And what do you think prevented your home from selling?
Boy, I don't know. It could be the agent, could be the price. I don't really know at this point.
Okay, so you're thinking maybe agent, maybe price at this point. Okay, and where were you going to?
I was going to go to San Diego.
Okay, frustrated, disappointed?
Yeah, I am, absolutely.
Okay, so now what do we know about Brandon's situation? 6 months on the market. What else? Help me out.
He's frustrated.
Okay, so he's frustrated. 6 months expired, right? He's frustrated.
He doesn't know what happened.
Okay, he's confused.
Thank you.
He thinks it could be the agent. What was his other answer? It could be what? Agent or the price. Okay, and he wanted to be where?
San Diego.
San Diego. Do you see where I'm going with this? Do you see this? Thank, acknowledge, and promise. If I wanted to convert this from a monologue into a dialogue where I started to immediately offer value to Brandon, what's the value at this point? If I start to say things that might thank you, acknowledge, and promise, these things like this, if I said, first of all, Brandon, thank you. When we talked the other day on the phone, you mentioned that you were absolutely frustrated because your home was on the market for 6 months. And you said that you thought it might be because of the agent or that the home was overpriced. And you and your family are not in San Diego because of that. So I want to acknowledge that, and I also want to promise this, that based upon our conversation this morning, if you will follow my lead and do exactly what I'm suggesting here, you and your family will not only get your home sold, but you're going to be in San Diego at a time that we both agree will happen. Are you ready to get started?
Sounds good to me.
Okay, now what have I done for him?
Personalized.
Okay, I personalized it, yes. But what have I done practically?
Tell me
Show
about
leadership.
plan too.
I did. I started to give him a vision of it, right? Cast a vision. Isn't that what great leaders do? They cast a vision. Would you say?
You reminded him why he was moving.
Okay, so I reminded him.
It's an ultimate communication.
And what is it?
It's empathy on his situation.
Okay, empathy. Well, there's a word that we use. The
Listen.
number one human need is what?
Listen,
The number one human need.
technology.
Validated.
Validation. I just validated him. You want to offer greater value than anybody could, period? Than anybody ever could. I don't care what brand they're with or what commission they offer. You want to offer the greatest value, say yes.
Yes.
Then be great at validating people. That when they're in your presence, they feel better about their situation and themselves. Your number one ability as a leader is to help people feel safe and secure. That's what we're looking for in leadership. If the leadership of this organization didn't know what it was doing and acted like it and demonstrated that it didn't and it lacked confidence, would you be here in this organization?
No.
Say it loudly.
No.
No. You're looking for an organization that is what? Confident, clear, concise, that provides leadership. This is what has to happen. If you do it, this is where you can be. Let me cast a vision for you, right? That's why you're here. Say yes.
Yes.
You have to do the same thing for your clients. But you never get an opportunity to do that if people don't feel safe and secure with you. Well, the things that we do to help people start to feel safe and secure is to validate them, to understand what their wants, needs, wishes, desires, hopes, and fears are. Wants, right? Needs, hopes, desires, frustrations, right? And then begin to recognize them. From the outset in my presentation with them at the home, I use the thank you, the acknowledgement, and the promise, which most people use as fillers, as throwaways. How many of you have gotten into an elevator and told a stranger good morning? You do that, right? You walk out of the elevator, if I were to quiz you and ask you what were they wearing, what the color of their eyes, what did their hair look like, in most cases you would have what? No clue, you wouldn't remember. Because really it didn't matter. You were just being what? You were just being nice. Well, we're trained to be nice. So when we sit down with somebody, of course we're going to say thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity. But it really doesn't what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it doesn't what? See, great leaders are constantly working to validate people, to make them feel better about themselves when they're in the presence of the leader. Because if they don't feel better about themselves in the presence of the leader, they will never follow the leader. Does this make sense? Does it make sense?
Yes.
And you all have the capacity to do this. You just simply have to recognize that this is an opportunity, as long as I pre-qualify, to begin to build that connection, that rapport, and ultimately the value that people want, which is safety and security in their decision. Yes?
In addition to that, what you're doing is you're also setting yourself apart. Assuming that everybody else is going to be thanking them and all the fluff.
Right, they
What
do.
have you done? You stand out like a beacon of light because you're different.
Yep.
You're a little different than these other guys. And they can't probably put an exact thing,
They can't.
point on it.
They can't.
They just feel it.
They
know
feel it.
And if you
It's a
say
feeling.
this right, if you say that part right with the tap, you're halfway there.
So Brandon just said something that's exceptionally important. How many of you are logical? Raise your hands if you're logical. Come on. Really? Some of you are logical? Really? Come on. You're logical. I mean, you brush your teeth wide because you don't want cavities, you don't want your breath to, right? Isn't that logical? We brush our teeth for those reasons. That's logical. You're logical, right? But how many of you conduct yourself based upon logic consistently? Come on. If you do, raise your hands. Okay, good. So we've got a room of people actually being willing to admit the truth. See, the truth is, we like to think that we're logical, but we're actually what? What are we? We're emotional. Well, your clients are emotional. They're emotional. They're going to take decisions based upon what? By the way they feel. So they can't put their finger on it. All they know is that they felt differently in the conversation. And oftentimes in our marketplace, and this is not me chiding or belittling or demeaning, but people oftentimes say, well, I have to pray about it. Have you ever had clients say that to you? right? Which is great. I respect that. And they'll come back, in most cases they'll say, we've decided to list with you. Now, if at the end of the conversation they didn't have the right feeling, would they even say that we're going to take the opportunity to pray about it? No. It was the feeling that they had that gave them an opportunity to then therefore pray about it. And because they felt great about it, my suspicion is that they probably got the answer that they felt they needed based upon the way they what? The way they felt. It's very basic, very simple. And if you'll understand this, it's not is this complicated? Can you all ask those questions in the pre-qual like I did with Brandon there very quickly to discover those things so that when you introduce yourself, you can say those things? Is there anyone in this room who can't do that? It's simple. You can do it. I saw a hand up. There was a hand up. Not just now, just about a minute ago. No? Okay.
I think it's important to remember, though, since we have a bunch of new people in here, is you gotta come prepared. I mean, have all your stuff, you have an outline of what you're going to do. Maybe you only make it through 3 things at the top and they're signing, or you go off on some tangent, because it's really important to find out what's happening next for them. You have to be prepared. You have to be prepared for an emotional person, and you have to be prepared for an analytical on every single appointment.
Yep.
Because you don't know.
You don't know what you're going to
If there's
get.
a partner involved, you never talk to them, you have no idea who's in the chart.
Yep. And Amy's absolutely correct. We don't have time to get into that, but the 4 personality styles being the drivers, the analyticals, the expressives, and the amiables. And everybody has a dominant personality style. You do, they do, right? We have to discover that and make certain we're communicating on their level and be prepared. An analytical is going to want a lot more what? Data. And if you don't have that data, you're not going to connect with them. If you don't speak their language, you're not going to connect with them. But everybody can start to feel that you care about them and feel validated, that you'll discover information and use that. This is not manipulation, ladies and gentlemen. You say, well, wait a minute. You're just taking some of the things that they said and repeating it back to them, and that just seems kind of sleazy. No, it isn't. It's one of the most selfless things that you could do, is letting people know that you what? One of the most frustrating things for me as a speaker is that when I'm in a room with people, I'm not saying this crowd, you're not doing it, but when I'm in a room with the group where they're not taking notes or they're not responding to the questions. When I ask something, I expect a response, and if I don't, what does that do to the speaker? I feel like I'm not getting what? Validated. Do I need to be validated?
Yes.
It's the very reason that I encourage you to give me answers, because if you're not giving me answers, we're not having a dialogue, I'm not being validated, I might as well walk out of the room. And sometimes our clients feel that way. I'm not being validated. I'd really like to just finish this conversation. I wish I could just walk out of this room, but I can't. It's my kitchen. When can I get this person out of the kitchen? Right? So, first step is what? We discover answers to the test that begins when? When we start at the kitchen table with TAP, T-A-P, which stands for promise. Step number 3. Brandon, what do we call it? We call it the roadmap, or we could also call it the what? What do you call it? What's the other thing? Call it the game plan. Okay? The game plan. Well, what is a roadmap and what is a game plan? Let me just very quickly here. There are a few things that we're going to do in the roadmap or the game plan. Those of you who know the answers, give them to me. What's the first thing that we want to do in the map or the game plan?
Set expectations.
Okay, so one of the things that I want to do is I want to discover, yes, we're going to set expectations, but how do we do that? I want to ask what? Questions. The only way to learn is to ask and discover. You can never discover something you don't know about somebody else unless you ask them a what? The most powerful tool that you have as a leader is your ability to ask questions. I just said something that was very profound there. You should write it down. Seriously. The most profound, powerful tool that you have as a great communicator, as a great leader, is questions is in, and they can't be in control because they're not the professional, they're not the leader. You are. So therefore you have to take control. This is not about taking control for control's sake. It's about taking control because you know it's the best thing for the outcome that they what? That they want. So you have to be the one who's asking the questions to discover what they need and what they want. So let's pause on that. Just somebody remember where we are. What they need and what they want. Yes?
I was gonna say, ask the right questions. Don't ask the wrong questions.
Right.
Because there are plenty of those.
There are plenty of wrong questions. And so therefore, I'm going to give you the right questions. And there are only a couple of them. And they're really simple. So what was the last thing that I said there? So I had my placeholder. What did I say?
7.
Okay, yes, you said it. What was it?
You said 7.
Set expectations. So I want you to think about this. This business transaction that you're proposing, guess what it really is? Say it. It's a relationship. Great relationships function because these are discovered. These are discovered. You see it? Say it. These are discovered and they're what? They're met. They're acknowledged, they're met. The purest way of acknowledging them is to do what? To meet them. I want you to think about that. Have you ever been in a relationship, maybe an intimate relationship, where the person you were with in that relationship understood your expectations but did not meet them? Or, worse, they never discovered your expectations and so therefore they never met them. How did the relationship go? Well, if you were married, how did it end? Divorce. What do you think causes divorce? It's this. I had a certain set of expectations. They had a certain set of expectations. And because those expectations were not met, the relationship what? It died. It broke down. So if you want your relationships with your clients to grow, to be fostered, right, to go well, we have to discover those expectations and then we have to what? Meet them. It's really simple. But the only way to discover their expectations is to do this. We have to what? Ask questions. So how about asking this question? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what do you, excuse me, I'm going to go one step back. Erase that, scratch it out. This helping so far?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, we got a few of you. Does the rest of you know?
Yes.
Okay, good, cool. So we said we need to discover expectations. So the first thing I want to discover is this. What has caused you to decide to what? Sell. Now, could this work with buyers? Say yes.
Yeah.
All I would have to do is, instead of saying what has caused you to decide to sell, I could change it to what's caused you to decide to buy a home. Okay? So what has caused you to decide to sell your home? Notice one word that I didn't put in there that we always want to ask because it makes it seem like so much easier. What's the word?
Why?
Yeah, I could say to Brandon, so Brandon, why did you decide to sell your home? Versus I could say, Brandon, so share with me, what's caused you to decide to sell your home? Which one sounds better? Why have you decided to sell your home versus share with me, what's caused you to decide to sell your home? Which one sounds better? Why?
It's not confrontational.
Say it.
Confrontation.
Yeah, the one is confrontational. Because see, when we ask the question why, we're looking for what? Why means justify. Justify your decision. Do they need to justify their decision with you? No. Do they need to feel like they need to justify their decision with you? If they feel that way, can you see how the relationship's not going to go well? But if they realize that you're just simply curious because you want to know so that you can help them, are they more likely to give you the answers that you need?
Yes.
Right? So instead of saying, why have you decided to sell your home? This is really important, so I'm spending time on this. Because you could go out there and say, why have you decided to sell your home? And some people will answer the question. But like Brandon said earlier, they feel a certain way when you communicate with them. And we all do. And when you're working with somebody who understands how to communicate effectively, you walk away not knowing why you feel so good about them, but you feel a certain way about them. This is going to be one of those things that will help them feel better about working with you and having a conversation. What has caused you to decide to sell your home? And then I just simply give them the opportunity to what? Tell so I can listen. And as they are telling me, as they're sharing it with me, I might do this. So Brandon, so share with me, what's caused you to decide to sell your home?
Well, I got a job transfer and The job starts when I get there, so I need to get there.
Okay, so Brennan, if you don't mind, I just want to make sure I'm taking some notes of these things that you're telling me so I don't forget them.
Okay.
Because obviously if you're sharing it with me, it's important. So would it be okay as you're talking that I take some notes?
Absolutely.
What am I doing there?
Validation.
I'm validating again.
Acknowledge.
Acknowledging. The number one human need is what? Validation, acknowledgement. Why? Because we all want to feel what? Validation really at the end of the day means this. I massacred it. What is that?
Security.
Security. Validation is security. Why do I say that? If we feel validated or acknowledged, or what's another word for it? Say it. Accepted. If we felt validated, acknowledged, wanted, accepted, right? It creates security. And is security important? Your brains, your reptilian brain, has been programmed for time immemorial to be accepted, to be validated. And there's a reason for that. Back in the day of the caveman and the cave woman, when we dwelled in caves and spent our time in forests, right? If we were not validated, we were alienated. Isn't that the opposite of being validated or accepted? It's being alienated or separated, to be cast out, right? To be cast out. In the day of the caveman and the cave woman, if we were separated from the tribe said, nope. It was probably more like, oh, right? We knew what that meant, right? Oh. It's like the last thing that anybody wanted to hear was, ugh, right? Because ugh meant that we were going to be alienated. If we were alienated, what was going to happen, Sean? You're not going to what?
Survive.
You're not going to survive. You're going to die. You're either going to get killed by a beast or by the other what? The other tribes. Because you were the enemy. You were a Visigoth or a Ostrogoth or a, what was the other ones? Neanderthal without a home. And without a home, you perished. Your brain still functions that way. It's the very reason that you resist prospecting to the level that you do. It is just visceral. Try as you know logically that you all are supposed to prospect, and yet most real estate agents refuse to do it. Why? Because of rejection. Because rejection in your mind is alienation, and alienation means a lack of security. A lack of security means that I am going to die. Now logically you don't look at it that way, but your Neanderthal brain does. Prospecting equals death. It's true. It's true. A lack of prospecting in the real estate business equals death. I want you to recognize everybody's wired this way. You're not unique. You're not exceptional in that way. You'll be unique and exceptional because you'll be willing to, despite that visceral desire to avoid that rejection, to simply go out and do it because you know logically that you're not going to die, despite what your ancient brain tells you. So what we're doing is we've got to make certain we're engaging in an activity that doesn't alienate people, but rather validates them. We've got to create this security. And that's what this begins to do. When he tells me his story, I write them down, and I repeat some of the things back to him. I write down those keywords, and I repeat back to him so he knows that I did what? Everybody wants to be heard. Everybody wants to be heard. Start listening. See, what we do, especially those of you who are new in the room, new to the business, those who are new in the business, raise your hands again. See, what you do is you do something very unfair to yourselves. You think you have to go in and do all of the talking. They're expecting me to perform. I've got to do all of this talking. That is the last thing that you should do. But if you would go in rather and start asking questions about them, what's caused them to decide to sell their home, and you start to discover that, and then begin to ask the other questions, you'll do exactly what they need in order to choose you, even though you're brand new in the business. Because you'll be doing what veteran agents still refuse to do and don't understand. Yes, did you have your hand up?
No.
Nope? Okay. Does this make sense? Did you need to get up?
No.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
You know what, John, though,
Yeah.
I was thinking about something that maybe is important. You know, we always get these cries, people that say this all the time, we've got to make this much money. We have to make this much money. So we've got, you know, and they're really asking you either listen this high or you compensate us.
Yep.
In some manner. And I get that before I go. I wanna know what their expectations are
Absolutely.
on price before I get there, because I wanna know.
Discover all their
I gotta be
expectations.
prepared in mind
Yep.
what I'm up against and, you know, figure out and stuff like that, but, usually when we give them the facts after that, and if we come prepared, then we know what to say, we can still get the listing. Even though they're telling us something
Of course.
that is not, they're telling us what they want, and we can say, oh, I understand,
Right.
that's what you want.
Did you hear what she's saying? The most important thing is to understand and be prepared for that conversation. Because you know what they find most important in whatever your response is? Do you think it's the actual words that you use that's most important? It's not. You know what it is? It's the confidence with which you respond. That's it. In most cases, people will be willing to accept whatever answer you give as long as you're confident in it. How many of you have ever taken a 7% listing before? If you choke on that question, what is your commission, and you have a hard time saving 7%, does that make them feel very confident about what you're going to charge them? No. But when somebody asks the question, what's your commission, you say it's 7%. Do you have any other questions? Right? It communicates that you're what? I'm okay with that answer. And if you're okay with it, they're more likely to be what?
Okay.
Be prepared with what they are going to talk about and what questions that they have. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes? Yeah. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Remember, we're having a dialogue here. Thank you. I need validated. Okay. So what has caused you to decide to sell your home? You get the information. Brandon gave me some information. I can repeat back what he said. I'm not going to do that. But then I'm going to ask him this question, and I want you to write it down as a subset to this. In other words, it's a follow-up to this question that you just asked. Okay? So I'm going to make it a subset. I'm just going to draw an arrow here. Is there anything else? It causes Brandon to dig down deeper into the recesses of his mind to share with me anything else that might be important as to why he's deciding to sell his home. Does that make sense? Don't just take the first answer and say, well, that must be it. No, say, great. So you've decided to sell your home because it's a job transfer and you want to get to San Diego because you're excited about getting your family there and starting the new life. That's great. Brandon, is there anything else that's causing you to go to San Diego? And then he can give us the answer. He can say, well, actually, you know, I had a choice of going to San Diego or to Dallas, Texas. We chose San Diego because I have a brother there. And as siblings, we were just best friends, and we haven't had an opportunity to be in the same city since we left high school. I want to be closer to my brother. Would that be helpful to know that?
Yeah.
Right? But you never would have discovered that if you just simply took his superficial answer and didn't ask this question right here, which is what? Is there anything else? Okay, did you get that? Make sense? Yes, sir.
This is a great opportunity to make sure you're talking to both parties.
Yes, because they have differing what?
Needs
And motivations. It's a great
And
point.
to get the other person involved.
It's a great
Sometimes
point.
even though we may have the decision maker who's in charge, we talk to them a lot. You gotta bring them in.
Got to have both on board, right?
Yep.
Yep. Because will the decision maker decide not to work with you even though they loved you if the other person didn't? If they want to stay married to them.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's a great point. Did I see another hand? No? Okay, good. So that's that first question that we're going to discuss in the game plan. What's the second one, Brandon?
I know what mine is, and
Okay.
that's what you expect
Yes.
from an agent.
So I would say to Brandon, so Brandon, share with me, what would you expect, or what do you expect, either one is fine, expect me to do to get your home what? Sold. Now notice I'm not asking what results you're looking for. How much money do you want? What do you want the scenario to look like? It's specifically, what do you think a great agent who's actually selling homes in the marketplace needs to do in today's market to make that happen? In other words, what do you expect me to do to get your home sold? Yes?
Your point earlier about the action plan. This is what tells you what to go over.
Okay, did you hear what he just said?
Exactly.
So if you have a 21-point plan of action, you have an opportunity to sit down with them and go over 21 points and bore them to tears, right? Or,
Ask them what's important and then address it.
and you wouldn't go to the list and say, could you read through this list and share with me what's important? You would just simply ask the question, so Brandon, share with me, what would you expect me to do to get your home sold? What are some of the best techniques you think that an agent should use today to get their home sold? Now, what oftentimes will they say to that question?
I
That's your job.
I don't know, you're the professional, it's your job, right? Do they say that? Say yes.
That's why I'm
They
paying.
do. Okay, so how do you respond to that? How would you respond? Would you then begin to tell them all the things that are important? Like, well, it's very important because over 90% of buyers start their home buying search on the internet, so therefore we need to make certain we have an internet presence. You could say that, right?
Yeah.
But do you want to?
No.
No.
No, you don't. What's the next step here?
Sign the contract.
It's never too early to close, right? But what do we do here?
Ask questions.
Okay, but what is that? What does it look like? Brandon, what do we do, or anybody?
So if you say,
How do you feel about communication? Is communication important to you?
Okay. I could do that, yes, because I can give them an idea. It starts to spur the conversation. Let me go back one step. Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
I'm just saying you're almost asking the question in a different format because, well, I might back it with a separate question. Well, do you find you as a seller, do you think you're unique in regards that you're the only one that's doing this property? No, I don't. Okay, so similar to other seller, you have certain expectations that you think is necessary to get a home sold, right? Well, what are those? So you're basically restating the question
Yeah,
again
that's it.
in a second format.
That's the answer. At this point, I can do what you did, and that's the second thing I'll do if what he just did doesn't work. But in most cases, what Rob just did will work. So I would say it, Rob said it, I'm going to say it just a little bit differently, but it accomplishes the same thing. I'm going to say, well, let's just, I know at this point you don't know, but let's just imagine that you did. Let's just take a guess. What do you think, just guessing, what do you think would be some of the important things that an agent should do? Right? And then at that point, if they don't know, they say, really, honestly, I don't know, then you go to what Justin just said, which was what? Well, do you think that marketing would be important? Right? Now you've given them an answer to either validate that that's something we should talk about or not. If they said, yes, I think it's important, then you know that you need to talk about what? Marketing. But if they said, no, not really, that's not what I don't think so, no. I think it's just getting it on the MLS. Okay, great. So on the MLS, is there anything else that's important? Well, yeah, actually, I'm thinking that the price that we set is important. Go ahead.
in addition to this, you look at the scenario, which is in this case is an expired. They're frustrated.
Yep.
You can always go back to their frustration. You can always go back to things I've already told you and say, no, let me ask you this. You said you were really frustrated before.
Yep.
Tell me what made you frustrated. And a lot of times we know that, we know that the agent, it could be the agent of the price.
Yep.
So there was probably lack of communication. So then you kind of,
Right.
you accomplish the same thing by what they've already told you.
They've given you answers. So go back to it and say, so you mentioned you were frustrated with the process. You said it might have been the agent. What do you think the agent didn't do that they should have done aside from getting your home sold that would have allowed you to get your home sold, right?
Right.
Great.
Or you look at times in the past, and maybe it's not an expired, maybe it's an SOI or something. You go, when you bought this home before, was there anything that did this or
Right.
did that? So
Right. Notice that all of this is not statements, but they're what? A series of questions. Stop making so many statements and start asking a lot more questions. Give them the opportunity to make the statements. Yes.
I was going to just say, the purpose of what is being done right here is we have a tendency to ask one question, and then if we don't get the answer that we're either looking for, we provide what we think they would be interested too quickly. Versus, so the example is, what do you think an agent is doing? I don't know, you tell me. Well, is communication too important to you? So I think communication would be important, so I automatic, since they didn't answer my question that I asked, I give them the answer in the form of a question versus restating my first question in a form that requires them to answer the question.
Right. To actually think about it. Because at the end of the day, what do we like to talk about? Ourselves and the things that what? That we want to talk about. People don't like to talk about the things that you like to talk about if they're not interested in them. That's why we always go back to wanting to talk about ourselves, because it's the most interesting topic as far as we're concerned. Right? So asking these questions about what do they expect you to do to get the home sold, at the end of the day, that is the most important thing that you could discover in this conversation, ultimately, in terms of meeting their what? Expectations. Because if you don't understand what they expect, and you don't meet their expectations, the relationship will die. And oftentimes it dies right there in that nascent stage on the kitchen table before you ever get a contract signed. You won't get the contract signed if they don't feel like you're gonna meet their expectations. Yes, Amy?
And another thing, I don't know if you would agree with this or not, but it's to keep your responses positive. So if they say something like yeah, well, you never did any open houses. So open houses are important to you.
Right.
And not be negative and never say anything bad about another agent. This is our industry. We want to make sure we are never saying
Ever.
Ever.
Because it will come back. You'll be surprised. It'll come back.
Anything like that. But even if it doesn't, it's disrespecting our
Yep.
it's our profession. But keeping it positive and just kind of getting to create a different kind of energy.
Yeah, so if the client says, for example, the prospect says, well, they never did an open house. They never did an open house. What were they thinking?
Yeah.
I mean, professional agents always do open houses. You just
Right.
wouldn't do that. You'd say, an open house. They didn't do an open house. Interesting. So are you interested? Is that important to you? Would you like open houses to be done? Well, yes, I would. Great. So if we agreed to put together a schedule for open houses, would that be important to you? Would you like that to happen? Yes. Great. So let's make sure that that's one of the things that we do. So I make certain that we're meeting your expectations and actually getting your home exposed. Isn't that a different conversation? Say yes.
Yes.
Okay. So what would you expect me to do to get your home sold? Brandon says what? Brandon, what would you expect me to do to get your home sold?
Well, just do whatever you do. I mean, I
Okay.
don't know. I mean,
That's great.
I haven't done this before. This is my new first house.
I get it. And the good news is I am a professional. What's even more interesting than that, and it's something I think that you should know, Brandon, is that my company last year sold over 5,000 homes. Now, why that's important to you and why I want to share that with you is this. How many homes do you want to sell?
One.
Just one. So if we can sell 5,000, obviously we can sell one, right?
Yeah, it sounds like it.
So based upon what we've talked about at this point, how do you feel about us working together?
Well, geez, pretty good if you could get me those results.
Okay, now he may not say that, but what I'm doing here, I'm taking a temperature what?
A gauge.
A temperature gauge. If he feels like he's okay moving forward and actually signing a contract, I'm going to do that at this point. But if we really had enough of a conversation, in most cases, for somebody to say, yes, I want to work with you and sign the contract, the answer is what? No, probably not. So if he says, no, it sounds great, but I want to learn more, I don't know what your commission is, I don't know the other things you do to get a home sold, I'm just going to simply go back and put the burden on him to tell me, and it goes back to what Rob said. So I know you've never sold a home before, but if you could, Brandon, just guess what you think would be one of the more important things that an agent could do. If you were an agent, what do you think should be happening in today's market?
Well, I've heard from my friends on Facebook, and they've had their home on the market, that they never heard from their agent, so communication.
So communication. So I discovered that communication is important, right? So I write that down. I say, okay, so Brandon, communication is important. Okay, let's hold on that for a second. Let's set that aside. Is there anything else that you believe would be important?
I want to know if you have a lot of buyers, if you're working with a lot of buyers.
Okay, so now he wants to know about my prospects for buyers, okay? So do I work with a lot of buyers, okay? So he wants to talk about that. So Brandon, we've got communication and am I working with a lot of buyers? Is there anything else that you believe would be important?
I think that's it.
Okay, that process is called isolation. I'm simply trying to isolate the things that are important to him. Now remember, I had a plan of action that had 21 points to it. Those 21 points are irrelevant at this point. What's relevant is the things that he just said were important to him. What else do I need to talk about? Say nothing.
Nothing.
All I need to do is talk about those. Guess who gave me permission to just talk about 2 things and not 21? He did. So now all I have to do is talk about it. So what I would do is then I would say, okay, Brandon, let's take those in turn. You mentioned that communication is important to me. What could I say at this point? What could I say? This is a trick question. Go ahead.
What are your how often would you like to hear from me? Or
Okay, so I'm going to ask more questions to discover what it looks like. Yes, but I'm going to do something just before that. What were you going to say, Rob?
I was going to say I would do an isolation close,
Okay.
kind of a test close. Just basically saying, okay, Brandon, just want to make sure that we're on the same page here. If we're able to resolve the concerns that you have about communication and buyers, and you feel comfortable, confident that we could actually work together, and those concerns are resolved, at that point, would you feel prepared and able to work together? I would probably do like a trial close to see exactly what that would be.
In other words, what he's doing is he's future pacing them. As long as we have this conversation about the things that you said were important, and you feel good about it, it sounds like we're going to be able to work together. Yes, great. Now all we have to do then is resolve those 2 things. That's it. And so then, Brandon, what I would do is, instead of giving them the detail of the communication, I would say, Brandon, you said communication is important. Tell me more about that. I understand communication is important to him. Do I have all the answers to the test on communication? No, so let's discover what it is. Now, Brandon was doing it in a different way, which is fine, saying, so what do you want that communication to look like? Do you prefer text, email, phone calls, face-to-face? What does that look like? I want to leave it open-ended and say, tell me more about that. And if he doesn't have suggestions, then I'm going to give suggestions as he did. But my initial response is, at this point, because I've been trained to, is to not give them the answer, but rather to ask them so that they come up with the what? Whose answer is always best? Theirs. So don't make it your answer. Give them the opportunity to give the answer. And when they do, then they're more likely to buy off on it, and they'll follow your process. So if we address these two things to your satisfaction, would you feel good about signing the contract tonight and getting your home on the market? He says yes. Whose idea was that? His, not mine. So we address those things. Communication is important to you, Brandon. Tell me more about that. Well, the last agent I worked with never called me. Anytime we had to have a conversation, I was the one who had to reach out to him. So obviously that made you frustrated. Yes, it did. So what would you then, based upon that challenge you had, what would you want the communication to look like? Tell me more about that. Well, I would like it to look like what?
Well, at least once a week.
Okay, so once a week. So if we were to talk once a week about what? What would you want to know about?
I just want to know what's going on.
So you notice I didn't tell him what we're going to talk about. Again, instead of making statements, I discovered. Tell me more about that. You want to talk once a week about what? What would you like to know about?
I just want to know what's going on.
Okay.
I just want to hear from you.
Okay, so if we talked about what was going on, specifically what I was doing to market your home, the people I talked to, the appointments that we had for showings, what those agents said and what their clients said, and I think more importantly what those clients did, if they bought another home or if they're still considering yours. If we talked about what's happening generally in the market, the homes that were new in the market in your neighborhood as well as those that sold, if we were having a conversation about those things, is that what you'd want?
Absolutely.
Would that cover everything that you want?
Yeah, I think so.
Is there anything that would be missing there?
No, I can't.
Okay, so then let's make certain that that happens as we work together. If that's happening, then have we taken care of your concerns about communication?
Yes.
Boom. Half of my challenge is gone. Now I have to just work on buyer. Brandon, you said buyers were important to you. You asked me about buyers I'm working with. Tell me more about that. What are your thoughts about saying that?
Well, I want an agent that's worked with a lot of buyers. I want somebody that's going to be able to sell my home.
Okay. It's interesting that you say that, and you've clued into something that most people don't understand and don't really even talk about. I rarely have anybody say that. But the cool thing about working with my company is this. The thing that makes us so great is that we are a listing-centric company. In fact, you won't find an office in the state of Utah that has more listings on the marketplace than my office. And guess what listings attract?
Buyers.
Buyers. So if you want to work with an agent who has access to a lot of buyers and attracting a lot of buyers, you're going to want to work with me. Do you see that?
I think that makes
Okay. Does that meet your expectations?
Yeah. What do you specifically do to find buyers?
I love that. So, Brandon, I guess the best way to share this with you would be to ask you this question. Do you realize that there is a difference between agents? There are passive and aggressive agents.
No, I didn't know that.
Well, think about that. Passive versus aggressive. How would you describe aggressive? If you were an agent, in the marketplace, what do you think an aggressive agent would do?
Go out and find people to buy my home.
Simply, in other words, be what? Proactive.
Right.
Versus passive, which was what?
Just waiting.
Waiting. So it sounds like you want to work with an agent who's going to be aggressive, meaning going to be proactive and going out and trying to find people.
Yeah, I think that's what.
Okay. How would an agent do that, just from your perspective? What do you think that they could do to be proactive?
Well, I don't know, internet and probably make phone calls and.
Okay. Cool. Every agent's going to put the home on the market and put it on the internet. They will do that. In fact, their company will do that for them.
Okay.
But what the company won't do for the agent is actually do what you just suggested, which is call people. And equally important, knock on the doors of people they don't know. I mean, Brandon, you know this. You know what the number one fear of human beings is?
Rejection.
Rejection, but it's to talk to people. It's public speaking. And believe it or not, the average agent is afraid to go out and talk to people. It's why you see so many expired homes on the market with sellers who are frustrated. The cool thing about working with me is this. I follow a schedule. My schedule starts this way. I show up at the office at 8 a.m. and I prepare for 15 minutes to get on the phone to talk to potential buyers about my listings and exposing my clients' homes to the marketplace, as well as talking to top agents in the marketplace to let them know that my sellers have a home on the marketplace. If I were doing those things proactively and talking to your neighbors and talking to people in the marketplace, people I don't know, but going out and letting the world know proactively that your home is on the market, would that meet your expectations? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I guess, if you bring it up that way, I mean, that's why you're here, you called me.
I guess it is, isn't it? So based upon what we've talked about, are you ready to get started?
I'd like to talk about commissions, but yeah, that sounds good.
Perfect. So let's set commissions aside for a moment, based upon communication and the buyer pool, and knowing that we are the right company in terms of generating buyer leads and proactively going out and doing that. Are we meeting your expectations?
Yeah, absolutely.
So now all we have to do is then talk about the commission. We can get started.
Okay.
Perfect. Make sense? Yes? Questions? Thoughts? Yes.
When you're doing this, just a little thing for the new agents, it's, my mindset here is like I'm in a canoe going down a river.
Yep.
And there's rocks in the way, and I just simply just ease and stream, get in the stream right around them, handle them, deal with it, but it's go with the flow.
Go with the flow.
And
Just
you're
make
leading,
certain-
and you're leading them to a place.
Right, because the
Because
stream
the
goes.
questions- Yeah, the questions are the rudder.
Yep. The stream always goes to the right destination. It's just that sometimes we have to move around.
Navigate it.
Yep, navigate. Okay, so we're in the map, right? So it's what's caused you to decide to sell your home, and then the B part to the map is what do you expect an agent to do to get your home sold? We showed you that process. And then C is this in the map is we talk about the market, we talk about the price of the home, and then we talk about paperwork. And the paperwork, of course, is the contract and everything else that goes with that. Okay? So what I would do, all the role play's done at this point. Yes.
Sorry, just adding to your B.
Yep.
Especially if you're new licensee, if you're concerned about asking the question, what would you expect an agent to do? It's fine to ask that, but also what would you expect from the company? Use the company as you did your examples to have the results if you yourself are new in the business and you don't have the results yourself. So you rely upon the company by asking that question. What would you expect from a company that you use to sell your home?
It's great advice, and what I would say is this. As long as you present in a confident way, you will rarely get asked the question, how long have you been in business and how many homes have you sold? The only reason that somebody will ask you that question in most cases, how long have you been in the business and how many homes have you sold, is why? They're not feeling what? Confidence. So as long as you are confident, they will feel confident. You will never permit somebody else to feel confident in a situation if you're not. It's your lack of confidence that makes them feel a lack of confidence. So what Rob said is very important. If you don't feel confident in your track record, then feel confident in the companies and go in and speak confidently. It's irrelevant that you haven't sold hundreds of homes in your career. It's irrelevant. What's relevant is that you're coached and you're trained and you're with the best company in the marketplace. Rely upon that. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. So in the map, we're going to cover those three things. So what I would say to Brandon, Brandon, first of all, thank you. In our conversation the other day, you mentioned that you were very frustrated because you had your home on the market for 6 months. You expected to be in San Diego because of the job transfer, and you said that you thought that maybe it was the agent or maybe the home was overpriced. And I just want to acknowledge that, and I promise you this, that in our conversation this morning that we have, I'm going to discover what your expectations are, and you're going to learn with me as we have this conversation about exactly what we need to do this time to make certain that your home actually gets sold so we can get you and your family to San Diego. So based upon that, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, that's great.
Great. So as we get started here, what I want to do is I just want to give you a roadmap or a game plan, if I could, so you know what to expect in our conversation. The first thing that we're going to talk about is really what's caused you to decide to sell your home. Now, I know we've already had some conversation about that, but I just want to make certain that if there's anything else that we need to talk about that's important to you, that would be important for me to know, that I know that. Because here's what I understand. You have a set of expectations. And if I don't ask these questions, and we don't have this conversation, and I don't discover your expectations, I'm not going to meet them. And if I don't meet your expectations, how are you going to feel?
I'm going to be frustrated.
You're going to be frustrated. And we know that you don't want to feel what? Frustrated. So let's make certain that we have that conversation. Once we've had that conversation, then I want to move on to what you expect me to do to actually get your home sold. And what I mean by that is, I know you want your home sold. I get that. But more specifically, what do you think a top agent like myself needs to do in today's marketplace to actually get a home sold? What are some of the techniques that they should be using to get a home sold? You and I are going to have that conversation again because it comes back to your expectations. I need to understand what they are. So if I can understand your expectations and meet them, how are you going to feel about working with me? That's what you're looking for, right? Great. And then once we've done that, then we'll just simply talk about the market, where it's been, where it is right now, and where it's going over the next couple of months so that we're on the same page and we can craft a plan that's actually going to get your home sold this time. Fair enough?
Okay.
And then what we'll do is we're going to work together as a team to get your home priced so that it actually sells this time. One of the best marketing techniques ever invented in real estate is making certain that we choose the right price. See, the buyer gets to determine the value. You and I get to determine the price, and the price has to equal the value. Does that make sense?
It does.
So you and I are going to work together to make certain that that happens, okay? And then once we've done that, then we're just going to complete some paperwork to get your home on the market and get it sold. So you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
Great. So having said that, then, let me just ask you, what's, in addition to the fact that there's the job transfer, share with me. Maybe tell me a little bit more about that. And we're going to go through the conversation we just went through the last half an hour. Does that make sense? This is really simple. It's simple if you will map it out and recognize that you don't have to do all the talking, you just simply have to ask the questions. Now this has been recorded today. What you need to do is go back and watch it and listen to it over and 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 over again until you can stand up here and do exactly what I just did and teach other people. You have to have that ability. Because if you can't, you'll never go out and perform that way in front of your sellers. You have to understand it to this level. Now, does that mean that you should avoid going on listing presentations because you don't understand it to this level? Say no. No. One of the best ways to actually learn something is to do it. How many of you learned to swim outside of the swimming pool? Who threw you in? Who needs to throw you into the listing presentation? Brandon, would you volunteer for the job of throwing them in?
Sure.
Okay,
I
great.
could probably do most of it, maybe not Sean.
Okay, look. Great job on being here. I have shared with you, I wish somebody had sat down with me 24 years ago and had this conversation with me. They didn't. I had to learn it by piecing it together over the course of 24 years. The cool thing is you're with a company that recognizes what it takes to actually be successful. Not the easy answers, not the lies, not the distractions, not the, we got a great system that generates leads and we'll hand you the fish every time you're hungry, because that doesn't work and we know it. It's not this gizmo and that gadget, because that doesn't work. Those are constantly changing. Everybody has the newest thing to sell, some snake oil. What I have shared with you today is something that you can take with you and carry it with you wherever you go. Doesn't matter where you are. You can leverage it. Not only in business, but in your personal relationships, because these concepts we've talked about discovering expectations, asking questions, and validating people, and meeting their expectations through discovery and asking questions, right, and validating, you can be a master at creating and maintaining relationships, and that's what I want for you. Because if you can become that in the business of relationship or in the business of real estate, you become extremely wealthy. And I don't think any of you got into this business as a philanthropic endeavor. Did you? Is this a charity for you? Some people are saying it feels like it at times. You have the ability to become a millionaire because of this business, so if we figure this out. You are leaders, and your number one skill is communication. And your number one ability in great communication is asking questions. Fair enough?
Yes.
Great job on being here. Good job being here. What's your name? Matt? Okay, is this helpful? Absolutely. Good. Great. You're welcome. It's good to have somebody who sees it and has experience. Got it.